Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the McGraw Council. Today, we are blessed and honored to have Mr. Jim Owens of JobFormance. Jim, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I had to wear the flannel today because here in the Chicago suburbs, we got snow. It didn't accumulate, but we got snow. It's on the cars. I can send out a picture. I'll post a picture underneath this.
Please do. Please do.
We got snow on the cars today, so a little frustrating, but here it is.
We're probably 25 degrees ahead of you here in Dallas. It was about low 40s, high 50s this morning and raining.
Well, I'm ready for like some comfort food, a big stew, and a winter's nap.
You know? Amen, brother.
Flannel shirt, the beard. I'm ready for winter.
I love it. Hey, you're rocking it, so keep it going. I'm trying to follow suit with the beard here.
I'm going to apply to be the next. Was that the Bounty paper towels guy?
Exactly. So tell us. Go ahead.
Hey, I got to find my next career move. Maybe that's it.
Marketing, branding.
There it is.
So please, let's get right into it. Monday afternoon here. What is the latest in talent acquisition / retention? What are you seeing? What's applicable to small businesses? What's kind of like the 30,000 foot view?
Yeah, I think for small businesses, it's always about it's always about the confidence in your hire, right? And everybody's had that mishire. Whether that person, you were excited to have them and they didn't fit the bill, or you were excited to have them and you couldn't keep them, right? Because they just didn't have enough for them. Mm-hmm. So it's always that, call it a mishire. You underhired or overhired, and those are costly. And small companies, and even probably in our shoes, John, we don't have the wherewithal or big company budgets to add people at will.
Exactly.
And even have think about like a restaurant servers, right? There's a natural attrition there that happens. And I'm sure if we could talk to somebody like a restaurant manager, their frustration is the amount of turnover and how do they carbon copy their good people. But then sometimes their good people don't always just stick around because, it's not just because it's a bad job. It's just people move on.
I was going to say that they'd like to move up too, because if they're good at what they do, there's typically that internal drive, that ambition to take the next step.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the big one there, right? Is you've got this fear of hiring and mishiring and having the right person. And so I think that's right on top, that small business world. That's the issue because, you can't, large companies have the same problem, but they seem to handle the mishire or the misalignment a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. They have more scale. They have more bandwidth. They can recover a lot easier. I mean, even from like a percentage basis, if you look at a company with, pick a number, 100 employees, you make one employee mistake, it's 1% of your employment. Whereas if you only have, a dozen, it's a significantly bigger deal.
It is. And then you'll hear small companies talk about, they're a team of eight or 10 people, and they have a mishire. And then after that person's gone, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they're gone. Or I'm so glad that it's amazing how they affected the culture or the vibe or, I love the term, the energy. Right. Yep. But it's true. And so that's what, even I have that here. I had a mishire in my team a few years back. And, after he left, I was like, wow, I'm so, glad he's not here.
Exactly. And I think some of that is a little bit of the experience thing. Sometimes you have to go through it once as a business owner. And it's like, all right, now I know what not to do. But I've got a funny question for you on that note real quick here, because with the massive unemployment we've seen, at peak, I think it was like around 43 million were filing for unemployment.
Yeah.
What I thought was that would indicate, a big surplus of talent and different unique skills and such. Number one, is that a true hypothesis? And number two, how do you balance that with keeping your culture? Because you got to keep your culture, but at the same time, you potentially have a very rich talent pool out there.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that we saw in the unemployment ranks, or at least the economic theory behind it when it started back in April. One is you look at your balance sheet or your cash flows, right? And you can't afford to keep paying when revenue stops. You can't afford to keep paying your payroll, right? So clearly it's a cash flow issue because payroll's every other week. It's pure cash. Your banks are really tight. You can't run you can't run your revolving lineup on payroll, for 2 months and be like, oh, bank, don't worry, we'll take care of it when the cash flow essentially is stopped. We saw that here in March when they shut down Illinois and our clients shut things off. I mean, literally we'll talk small business practicality here more than recruiting, but we shut down too. We sent a note to all of our people that we were engaged with, basically saying our business is shut down. Are you in? You're in with us as a vendor / team member. We're going to pay you when we can. Mm-hmm. And so it was great because I sent that note out quickly. I got great responses from people, and I think about even the folks that we rent from our office space. They were like, "Hey, we get it. We understand. Slide us some money when you can." And it was we had cash in the bank, and we held on to it a little bit. We let our accounts payables age, essentially.
Yep.
And so that's the practicality of it. But we didn't have to let people go because we're a commission type business. So that's a different animal. Whereas, if I had a company of staff, the PPP money was only so many weeks anyway. Mm-hmm. So part of it we saw, and I'm not an economist, but did we see the initial growth in unemployment? And then did we see after the PPP money ran out, did we see another blip of growth? But then, again, not an economist, but then the unemployment piece was pretty what's the best word there? But it was good.
Right. You had a good pulse point on it too, being in that industry. You can very much follow you when people are working, where they're working, when they're getting laid off, and so on and so forth.
So those companies that had, and again, not a CFO here, but if you had a good balance sheet and you could cull the herd, you could take some people out of your company and then maybe look to the marketplace to see what else would fit you and take the opportunity to, release your people that are on your 53-man roster and turn around and go to the free agency market and see what's out there. I'm sure a few companies did that, which changed that model. But I think it's interesting too, how many people really almost even selected themselves. Hey, it's COVID. I'm not going to work. I'm scared. I'm going to just take the voluntary layoff and I'm going to go get unemployment. I'm going to stay at home, protect myself from COVID. So I think a lot of pieces to the puzzle here, but I think companies reacted quickly. Hey, we can't afford the negative cash flow on payroll. It's got to go to unemployment.
So then in that line of reasoning, and we're kind of getting ready to enter this holiday season now, what are some things that you're keeping an eye on specifically, again, when we're talking the context of HR, maintaining your culture, getting the proper talent, retaining them? What are some things that you're kind of keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we've seen, again, more based on our client base in what I would call the greater manufacturing arena. Manufacturing and demand for manufacturing goods never slowed down.
Correct.
Manufacturing slowed down. So we're seeing manufacturers now running 24/7, in some cases 28/7 or 29/7 to keep up. And so you're seeing these manufacturers hiring people and having demand for people. And when you have low unemployment, there's a certain, again, not an economist here, but there's a certain amount of the employed people that are maybe unemployable, right? I'm saying that from an entrepreneurial side.
Right. They don't match the descriptions that you're looking to hire.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's always one of the feedback loops you get when you post a job out there. Like as a recruiter, if I post a job and people send me resumes, I get it. I'm part of the food chain. Maybe it's not that role that I'm working on, but it's another role that I'm working on.
Right.
And so so I appreciate them sending me a note because they're looking for a job and they think I can help them. That's great. Continue to do that. But they also have to realize too that when I get a resume or when I get contact from somebody, I'm sifting through saying, okay, does A fit B? And if it doesn't, I'm going down my decision tree, right?
Mm-hmm,
this resume is what I'm looking for. Yes, I spend time with it. No, it goes in circular file or in our request, we put it in our database and we move on. Right, we tag it with certain key terms, of where they're at, and putting it in our database for future references. But in the fact when they say, yeah, well, yes, we read their resume, we spend time with them on the phone, and then we try to make a recommendation. So as a small business, to go back, big circle to your question, as a small business, the keys to the culture are you as a hiring manager. What is the key to your hiring, right? And so I always say there's 3 pieces, and we've touched on it before from like a top grading perspective, which is a book by Brad Smart. Is you have your subjective and your objective pieces. And your subjective is, do you have an education? Yes or no questions. Do you have an education? Have you dealt with union environment? Have you been in retail sales? Have you been in consumer goods? Have you been in automotive or aerospace? Yes, no questions. Your objective thing is then, what is the culture? And it's probably easier to describe what culture is not than what culture is. And so it's, is it, we'll talk in manufacturing terms. Is it high volume, low mix? So I'm building left front fenders for a car, and I got to build 300,000 of them. If I divide that by the time of day per year, I have to punch out several of those a minute to keep up with my demand. But if I'm making, how many different kinds of Oreos are there, right? I still got to make a million. So I have high mix, high volume. But then I go back and I make, missiles for NASA. I'm building 1 missile every year, right? And so you have to look at what is the culture of that? Is it technical? So you think of like a Bose headphones, right? They are engineering based, very technical, very professional. But then you go look at like Black & Decker or Newell Rubbermaid. It's, if they can save a nickel a tub, they're going to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you look at all the, Ziploc bags and things of that nature, high volume, low cost, low margin, and so what is that? It's all marketing, right? How do you keep up with that? How do you, that's the predominance of your culture. But then you also look at the values of your culture, right? And so we've had companies that I've worked with that have, statements of faith, or they have statements of integrity in their business, or what their value statement is. Mm-hmm. And so you got to keep those things. And you have to ask people, hey, do you agree in the interview process? Do you agree with what we have as values in our company? Honesty, integrity, putting the customer first. And these are great interview questions. And you get those by making sure that person or that candidate looks at your website, looks at your company material, and gleans that from you. Mm-hmm. And then making it a point to ask for that in the piece, because you're hired for credentials and you're fired for culture. Exactly. And we all know, and culture is about, lack of a better term, it's about a click, it's about fitting in. And so if I go somewhere and I work for, say, the McGraw Council, and I don't fit in, I could fire myself before you fire me, which means I quit, or I move on, or I find a different job.
Exactly.
And then in that culture, like when we first talked about, I had this gentleman that worked for me, and I'm like, wow, when he was gone, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, Deep breath, right? And so he made the decision to fire himself by quitting and moving on. But was I there yet? No, not yet. But afterwards he was gone. I definitely had that inkling, right? And so you have these yes, no questions, and these open-ended questions, which are the subjective and the objective. But then again, part of my humor with the Brad Smart book, and I'll just call it chapter 14. He'll probably call me now and say, oh, it's chapter 16. But it's somewhere, it's like, it's your gut feel, right? When you spend time with somebody on the phone with their resume, talking to their references, you see a thread run through who they are, and you either feel like there's a gut feel to, hey, this person's going to vibe well with this, or they're not going to vibe well with this.
Mm-hmm. So then I've got a funny, if this gets too proprietary, let me know. But I'm curious if you can speak to it. Have you seen trends in certain skills or talents that are particularly desirable right now? Because again, here's where I'm going from like a macroeconomic perspective. Are we going to see a reboot of the economy of old, early 2020 before COVID, late 2019? Or are we looking at a massive shift across the board that's pretty sudden?
So I'm going to add, so what pops to my mind is kind of two thoughts here that were one in part A, part B. First is, this gig economy that people are talking about. Like it's a gig. You look at when I started in this business 20 years ago, you were always looking for employees with longevity. And now we're looking for people with logical progression in their resume or in their chronological history. And is this the next logical step in their career? So before, you'd see 3 to 4 years before there's a career move, maybe 6 years before somebody moves a company, but there's a promotion in there. And you start asking these people, why did you move? What's the next logical step? I think that's going to continue. The question will be, if we get to a gig economy where there's caretakers, that's going to be really interesting, because that's almost contract employment, right? Can you come in and do this? Can you take us from A? And this will be interesting, right? And here I'm gonna think out loud. Can you take us from A to B? And if you take us from A to B, as soon as you're done with B, do you have the ability to take us to C, or we need to go find the person that can take it? Now you're looking for been there, done that type of talent. And are you willing to risk that? Risk is maybe the right word, but are you willing to engage in hiring somebody on a contract role that may have an indefinite? How long does it take you to get from A to B or B to C? And so what does that mean from an employee's perspective, when there's a lot of employees out there that aren't ready for a gig economy, that they're a 1099 employee, that they want their benefits, they want their 401k, they want their, if there's even a pension out there anymore, but they want those things that are attached to the company that makes them feel safe versus just a paycheck.
Right.
Whereas the small business owner, we look at it and go, we're in our own gig economy anyway, because if our clients aren't buying what we're servicing or building, I don't even have a paycheck, let alone a 401k or benefits or anything like that. And so that's really interesting from the perspective of the reboot, or is it going to accelerate towards a gig economy? So one of my clients right now, they're trying to hire. So I'm working on a director of quality for one of my clients in Georgia, and all roads lead to Georgia. But in the short term, we understand with COVID and with what's happening that you may not relocate right away. And it might be a 6-month process. You're still going to go to headquarters. You still want to be in headquarters, but all roads lead to headquarters. And so at some point they're going to want to relocate, and headquarters is a primary job to where do you get your training, your managerial interaction. But we're talking to so many candidates that work for other large companies that we're working from home. I can do this from home. Why can I do this new job from home? And part of it is the answer is yes, but how do you build relationships? How do you take your career? How do you get managed to the next level? How do you fit in the company culture? How do you know you're not stepping on a landmine or somebody else is, walking over where the dead bodies are at? But so I don't know if I'm answering your question. I kind of rambled out loud there, but I think it's a unique area that we don't know what it's going to look like, and our company's upgrading their staff during this time. And then, and if you're out in the marketplace, being able to articulate what's next for you is probably more 95% of the battle, because people may not know what you can do.
For sure. And I think that comes back to that whole concept of knowing where you're trying to go. I mean, the clear vision that the company has and that the employee or applicant has, the easier you'll be able to line it up and say, hey, is this a good fit? Are we both shooting for the same target here? Because if so, that's going to be an awesome match, particularly if you've got that culture component as a big commonality, as a common bond.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Can both parties articulate what they're looking for? And if they do, I think there's a the old cliche, the win-win, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that hit me, and it keeps coming back in my mind, but I had the opportunity about it was early 2000s. I had the opportunity to sit down with the outgoing CEO of Maytag Corporation.
Nice.
And his name was Lynn Hadley. And he basically says, he goes, everybody asks me what I'm going to do in my retirement. He goes, I'm going to write my book on memoirs. And he said, my title is going to be Everything I Learned About Business I Learned on the Farm. And I started laughing. I'm like, okay, you're in the middle of Iowa. I'm in the middle of Iowa. all right, I'm the city kid. Teach me something about, the farm and business, right? And he goes, well, chickens that don't lay eggs get eaten. And I was like, that's genius. And, and I was like, is that it? That's not even a book. That's like a slogan type thing. But it is true though. In companies want people. I'm willing to train. So I'll speak for myself. I'm willing to train. I'm willing to teach. But I'm hiring you for my extra bandwidth. I'm not hiring you to do things I don't want to do. I'm hiring you for things that help me take my business further, lay some eggs, and how do you do that? And so I know when I've hired, I've always asked that question, okay, this is what I can do. I'm not here to split commissions with you, but I'm here to pay you to take my business further.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my need. And what can I articulate my need? And so like in my business, I hired a guy this time last year, and basically it was like, do you have a book of business? What do your contacts look like? Have you what has been your billable business? Can you bring, what can you bring with you? What can you not bring with you? Where do I have to teach you? And what are you, so help me understand some of your innate abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so it goes back to an experience I had before where in our business has changed a lot. We used to live on the phone. It was you stepped in the door, you got on the phone, and you left by hanging up. And at the end of the day, and if you're afraid of the phone, I can't teach you that. I can't fix that. But if you're not afraid of the phone, I can teach you terminology. I can teach you, process. I can teach you how to manipulate lists within the database and mine it for data. Mm-hmm. And so those are things those are easily teachable things. But to have people skills and to be on the phone and to interact with folks and listen intuitively, I can't teach those things. Those are very hard.
There's kind of like those soft foundational skills, so to speak. You can teach and train a lot, but there are a few things that you can't.
Yeah. And then you go back to my MBA courses. We talked in organizational development about leadership. And it's like, is it an innate ability or is it teachable? And it's like 50-50. And they said, well, the 50 part on the entrepreneurial side is it's innate ability. And then on the military and GE world, it's teachable.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right. So you have the structure. I can teach you anything as long as you understand the structure. But
important nuances. Right. Okay. So one more question for you, because I want to be conscientious of your time. We're about 23 minutes here. In terms of being very broad, 40,000 foot view, generalization or specialization in talent? I mean, because I feel like if you kind of look back over the last 10, 15 years, it's become increasingly more specialized. My gut feel is that we're almost moving more to a general stage. I might be wrong, and I preface that all by saying it's just a gut feel. What are you kind of saying?
Wow. It's funny. I wish you would have teased me with this question earlier. I would tell you two things again popped to my mind. First, everything that we look for, we're solving a problem, right? We're finding a round peg and putting it in a round hole. So that's specialization. But does that person have the ability to go to the next step, be promotable? The answer is yes, because that's part of the intellectual or the person's horsepower, their EQ, IQ to go to the next level. It's a little bit of asking the client, what are they looking for, right? You've been there, done that, or are you willing to promote somebody into this role that has more horsepower to go forward? That's a tough, I wouldn't, after doing this for 20 years, I can probably give you a high level of confidence I can do that. But it's only based on the thousands of interviews I've done.
Right.
But to have an entrepreneur go out and say, wow, does this person have the bandwidth when I interview them to go maybe the next level of my company? That's a hard one. So maybe they do hire for a little bit more generalization. But again, it's got to go back and kind of maybe punt this down the road for you. It's got to go back to what you're looking for as a hiring manager. Do I have a specialty skill that I need, or can I hire a generalist, right? Do you hire an HVAC guy to come in and fix your furnace, or do you hire a general contractor?
Yeah,
because he's going to call the HVAC guy anyway.
Exactly.
So I don't really. Maybe that's a bad answer for you, but it is. Again, for the small business owner, definitely got to look for is your task at hand. Is it?
You got to identify what you're shooting for. Because if you don't have a good vision of the target you're trying to hit, It doesn't matter if you're super specialized or generalized. You're not going to hit because you're not aiming at anything in particular.
Well, and give you a good example of this morning, we had a conference call with this client in Georgia. And so we're doing their director of quality search for them. And then one of the things they want to do is they want to add in into quality. They want to add in this voice of the customer aspect, which is the call center, the 800 number, and what are you having problems with? And so they understand quality. So is it a recall issue right away? If everybody's calling about it, is it a recall issue? Or was it a bad was it a bad handle that keeps breaking? So they should have made it out of stainless steel instead of pot metal, or I don't know exactly what problems are. But the idea is the feedback loop and getting it into quality. But then, that's a specialization, because most quality people spend their time in a plant or with vendors going over quality and testing and things of that nature. It's not post-purchase consumer feedback. And so that's a different animal, where that usually is held in sales and marketing. So it's kind of interesting. So you talk about specialty versus generalization. We have a generalization search of a director of quality, but the specialization comes from, do they have a specific experience or expertise that they want in that? And so a little bit of a weird example there, but
it's a trend. It's important to be aware of it. As a small business owner, I think it's imperative to know what kind of talent is out there, what they're equipped with, and then obviously to be forward looking and forward thinking, say, hey, what skills am I going to need in my organization for my specific purpose to get the job done and do it well?
Well, so you think about, like, I'm going to hire a waitress, and am I a Denny's manager, or am I Ruth Chris? Right?
Great point.
Because you better have some experience and knowledge of meat cuts and wines and side dishes. Where at Denny's, it's like moons over my hammy, or Rudy Fruity Fresh and Fruity.
Exactly.
So I'm not belittling the one over the other, but it's
two different targets, totally different targets, and two totally different scenarios.
Yeah.
Preaching.
Yeah. So hopefully that's gig versus specialty versus long-term generalist type thing. As an owner of a business or a hiring manager, the better you define, and I think maybe you and I talked about this, if you know what you're focused on, it's easy to accept and reject what you're looking at. Exactly. And so define your subjective and your objective of what you need. And then when that person runs across your desk, boom, there they are.
It'll be clear as day.
It's going to be, hopefully it's clear as day, or a snowy day.
Depends where you are, right?
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I got to say, I think the line of the day is definitely going to be that the chickens that don't lay eggs get eaten. I'm going to remember that one for a while.
Hey, everything you learned about business, you learned on a farm, I guess.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. Y'all, thanks for listening in today. Hope you found it helpful. Make sure to like our Facebook page, and please drop in the comments what you're seeing in your industries for talent management, talent acquisition, different trends. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep social, y'all. Remember to buy local, support small business. And as always, remember, we're bullish on the American dream, and we're bullish on your future. Stay safe, y'all.